The late afternoon sun dipped low over the quiet suburban street, its golden light spilling across rows of houses and the faint hum of traffic in the distance. Elena Walker adjusted the strap of her canvas bag, her heels clicking against the pavement as she hurried home from a long shift at the bookstore. She wanted nothing more than to kick off her shoes, brew a cup of tea, and lose herself in a novel before the night crept in. But fate often arrives uninvited. As she passed the small corner park, a sound tugged at her attention. Soft sniffles, the kind only a frightened child could make. Elena slowed, scanning the empty playground. The swing swayed gently in the breeze, chains squeaking. Then she saw him. A boy, no older than 7, with messy dark hair that fell into his eyes. He sat hunched on the edge of the sandbox, clutching a small toy car in his hand. His shoes were scuffed, and his shirt was untucked, like he had been wandering for hours. Elena's heart tightened. She approached carefully, not wanting to startle him. "Hey there," she said softly, crouching down to his level. "Are you okay? Did you get separated from your parents?" The boy lifted his gaze. Wide, stormy gray eyes met hers. Eyes that held both innocence and something heavier, something that didn't belong in a child so young. His lips trembled as he whispered, "I can't find my house. I think I'm lost." Elena's protective instinct kicked in immediately. She set her bag down and offered him a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, sweetheart. You're not alone anymore. We'll figure this out together." The boy hesitated before edging closer. "My name's Luca." "Hi, Luca. I'm Elena." She reached into her bag, pulling out a water bottle. "Here, you must be thirsty." He accepted it with small hands, sipping gratefully. His manners, even in distress, surprised her. Something about him, his sharp features, his quiet strength, felt unusual. He didn't seem like just any boy from the neighborhood. "Do you remember where you live? The street name, maybe?" Elena asked gently. Luca frowned, thinking hard. "It's a big house, with gates and guards." Elena blinked. Guards? That wasn't something you heard every day. Still, she kept her smile steady. "Okay, that helps. Maybe we can walk around a bit, see if anything looks familiar." The boy nodded, slipping his small hand into hers. His grip was tight, desperate, as though he had finally found an anchor in the storm. As they walked down the street, Elena tried to keep her voice light, asking questions to distract him. "Do you like toy cars?" She nodded toward the one clutched in his hand. His face lit briefly. "This one's my favorite. My papa gave it to me." There was tenderness in the way he said papa, but also a shadow she couldn't quite place. Minutes stretched as they wandered past unfamiliar blocks. Then Luca tugged her arm suddenly, his eyes widening. "There," he exclaimed, pointing. At the end of the road stood an estate unlike anything Elena had ever seen up close. Tall wrought iron gates, polished black, rose before them. Beyond them stretched a long driveway, lined with perfectly trimmed hedges and lit lanterns that flickered even in daylight. It looked more like a fortress than a home. Elena slowed, unease prickling the back of her neck. "This is where you live?" Luca nodded eagerly. "Yes, that's my house. Papa will be happy I'm back." She exhaled in relief, but couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped into something far bigger than a simple good deed. And then, movement. 2 men in dark. Suits appeared on the other side of the gates, their presence sharp and intimidating. Their eyes locked on Elena immediately, suspicion hardening their expressions. One of them spoke into a small earpiece, his jaw tense. The gates creaked open with a slow, deliberate groan. Elena's pulse quickened. She squeezed Luca's hand tighter, forcing calm into her voice. "Looks like your papa has some serious security, huh?" Luca simply smiled, tugging her forward. But Elena knew, deep down, that nothing about this moment was ordinary. She had found a lost boy, yes, but the man waiting inside, the father she had yet to meet, would change her life in ways she could never imagine. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed from within the estate. A presence loomed, commanding and dangerous, drawing nearer with every second. Elena's breath caught. She didn't know it yet, but the ruthless mafia boss was about to enter her world, and nothing would ever be the same again. The air grew heavier as Elena stepped past the gates, her fingers still laced with Luca's tiny hand. The long driveway stretched before them like a path into another world, a world of wealth, secrecy, and danger. Her heart drummed against her ribs, warning her to turn back, but Luca's trust kept her moving forward. The men in suits flanked them, silent as shadows. Their sharp eyes never left Elena, their hands hovering near their jackets as if weapons rested inside. She swallowed hard, refusing to show fear. Then, from the mansion's grand entrance, a man emerged. He walked with a power that seemed carved into his very bones. Tall, broad-shouldered, his presence commanding even from a distance. His tailored black suit fit him like armor, every movement precise, deliberate. Dark hair swept back from a face marked with sharp angles and a jawline like cut stone. But it was his eyes, storm gray, intense, unyielding, that froze Elena in place. The ruthless aura he carried left no doubt. This was Luca's father. This was the mafia boss. Luca's grip tightened, and with a cry of joy he broke free, running toward him. "Papa!" The man's expression shifted instantly. The hard mask cracked, replaced by raw relief as he knelt and scooped his son into his arms. He crushed Luca against his chest, closing his eyes as though holding on to the very reason he breathed. "You had me worried, Piccolo," he murmured, his deep voice carrying both tenderness and command. "Where have you been?" Luca pointed toward Elena, his smile innocent. "She helped me, Papa. I was lost. She found me and brought me home." Slowly, the man's gaze lifted and locked onto Elena. She felt it like a physical weight, those piercing eyes sweeping over her, assessing, calculating. For the first time in her life, Elena felt utterly exposed, as though he could see straight into her thoughts. He rose to his full height, Luca still perched on his hip, and strode toward her. The bodyguards shifted uneasily but did not interfere. When he stopped just a few feet away, the air between them tightened. "You brought my son home." His voice was deep, measured, carrying the kind of authority that didn't need to be raised to be feared. Elena forced herself to meet his gaze. He was alone, frightened. I couldn't just leave him out there. For a moment, silence hung. Then, unexpectedly, the corner of his mouth lifted, not into a smile exactly, but something close. A flicker of approval. "You have courage," he said. Most would have kept walking. Or worse. Luca tugged at his father's collar. "Papa, she was so nice. She gave me water and asked about my cars." Elena allowed herself a small laugh, tension easing just slightly. "He's very fond of that toy." The man studied her, the weight of his stare pressing down on her. "What is your name?" "Elena. Elena Walker." He repeated it under his breath, as though committing it to memory. Then his gaze sharpened again. "Do you know who I am, Elena?" The question pulsed with warning. Elena hesitated, but honesty slipped out before fear could censor her. "I can guess." The faintest trace of amusement flickered in his eyes, gone as quickly as it came. "Then you understand why my son's safety is everything." His tone carried an edge, a threat unspoken but crystal clear. Elena straightened her spine. "I didn't help him for a reward or because of who he is. I helped him because he's a child. Because he needed someone." That answer seemed to strike him. His eyes softened for a brief second, almost imperceptibly. Then he nodded once. "Come inside," he commanded. "You will have dinner with us." Elena blinked. "That's not necessary. It wasn't a request," he cut in, his voice firm, final. Before she could argue, Luca cheered. "Yes, please, Elena, stay for dinner." Her heart wavered. Between the boy's hopeful eyes and the iron authority of his father, Elena realized she had little choice. She was stepping deeper into this world, one she had no business entering. As the mansion's grand doors opened, spilling golden light across the marble steps, Elena knew her life was no longer on its safe, ordinary path. She was being pulled into the orbit of a man whose name whispered through the city like a shadow. And though she didn't know it yet, her decision to walk through those doors would bind her to the mafia boss in ways she could never have imagined. The grand double doors groaned open, revealing a world Elena had only ever glimpsed in glossy magazine spreads or on the silver screen. The foyer stretched wide and endless, lit by a chandelier that glittered like 1,000 frozen stars. Marble floors gleamed beneath her feet, each step echoing in the cavernous space. For a moment, Elena hesitated on the threshold, her modest cardigan and scuffed shoes starkly out of place in a palace of wealth, but Luca tugged her hand eagerly, his boyish grin melting her hesitation. "Come on, Elena. I want to show you my room." His father's low voice stopped him. "Later, Luca. First we dine." The boy pouted but nodded, nestling closer to his father's side. Elena followed as they moved deeper into the mansion, her eyes catching on details that spoke of power and history. Oil paintings of stern men in suits, glass cases filled with artifacts, a grand piano that sat silently in a corner. But beneath the beauty there was something else, something heavier. The air carried tension, as if the walls themselves had witnessed secrets too dark to tell. At the dining hall, a long mahogany table stretched across the room, polished to a mirror shine. Silver candelabras flickered, casting shadows that danced along the carved wood panels. Servants in crisp black uniforms appeared silently, laying out dishes that filled the air with the scent of roasted meats and herbs. Elena shifted uncomfortably as a chair was pulled out for her. She wasn't used to being served, and she certainly wasn't used to dining under the watchful eyes of armed men who lingered discreetly at the edges of the room. The mafia boss, Luca's father, sat at the head of the table. His presence filled the space more than the candlelight or the grandeur ever could. He gestured for her to sit beside Luca, directly across from him. "Eat," he instructed, his voice low, commanding. Elena picked up her fork, but her appetite had vanished, replaced by nervous energy. Still, she forced a bite, the flavors rich and overwhelming. Luca, on the other hand, ate happily, chattering about his toy cars, his favorite games, the book he had been reading. His father listened patiently, the hard lines of his face softening only for his son. But every so often his gaze flicked to Elena, sharp and assessing. She felt pinned beneath it, as though he were dissecting her with every glance. Finally, she couldn't stand the silence any longer. "You never told me your name," she said quietly. The man leaned back in his chair, wineglass in hand. "Names are dangerous in my world. But since you brought my son home, you may call me Damien." Damien. The way he said it, simple yet edged with steel, sent a shiver down her spine. "You run a very impressive household," Elena managed, her voice steady despite her nerves. A faint smirk tugged at his lips. "Impressive is one word for it. Necessary is another." His eyes darkened. "Power demands protection." Elena nodded, unsure how to respond. The truth pressed at her chest. She knew she should leave, finish her meal quickly, and go. But Luca's smile, his laughter anchored her. And Damien's presence, intimidating though it was, carried an undercurrent of something else. Something magnetic. Midway through the meal, Luca leaned across the table, whispering loudly, "Papa, can Elena stay longer?" "Please?" Damien's eyes flicked to hers again, unreadable. "That depends," he said slowly. "Does Elena wish to stay?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Elena swallowed hard. I should probably get going soon." Luca's shoulders slumped in disappointment, but Damien's expression revealed nothing. He simply nodded once, as though he had expected that answer. Dinner ended in uneasy silence. When Elena rose, Damien stood as well, towering and unshakable. "You have done me a service tonight," he said, his voice deep enough to vibrate through her bones. "I do not forget debts, nor do I forgive easily when my son is placed in danger. Remember that." The warning was clear, but so was the promise. As Damien escorted her to the door, Elena felt a strange mix of relief and reluctance. The cool night air greeted her as she stepped outside, but the weight of his gaze lingered like an invisible chain. She had returned a lost boy to his father. She had crossed the threshold of a world she did not belong to. And as she walked away from the mansion's looming silhouette, one truth settled in her chest. This was not the end. It was only the beginning. The following morning, Elena tried to slip back into the rhythm of her ordinary life. She stacked books at the store, smiled at customers, and poured herself into the comfort of routine. Yet no matter how many times she straightened shelves or rang up purchases, her mind kept wandering back to the mansion, back to Damien, his eyes, his presence, the warning laced in his voice. She shook the thoughts away. No, she told herself firmly. That world is not mine. I helped a child, that's all. But Damien wasn't a man who let chance encounters drift into nothingness. While Elena went about her day, his men were already moving. 2 black cars rolled silently through her neighborhood. Suited figures slipped into the bookstore, pretending to browse while their sharp eyes scanned every detail. They noted her schedule, her co-workers, even the modest apartment she returned to after work. Every scrap of her life was being collected and delivered to Damien. That evening, as the city lights blinked awake, Damien sat in his study, files spread before him. His fingers tapped against the mahogany desk as he scanned the reports. Elena Walker, 26 years old, works at Rosewood Books, no criminal record, no family in the city, independent, quiet, and unassuming. A woman who should have meant nothing. Yet, Damien found himself reading every line with a strange intensity. There was something about her. The way she had looked at Luca with genuine warmth. The way she had faced Damien without flinching, even when she knew who he was. Most people trembled in his presence. She had not. Sir, one of his men said carefully from the doorway, do you wish us to continue surveillance? Damien's jaw tightened. He should have said no. He should have let her walk away, as countless others had. But instead, his voice was firm. Certain. Yes. I want to know everything. Meanwhile, Elena sat curled on her small sofa, tea steaming in her hands. The day should have been ordinary, but her nerves hummed with unease. She glanced at the window more than once, convinced she felt eyes on her. It was silly, she reasoned. Just paranoia. Still, the image of men in dark suits haunted her thoughts. Her phone buzzed suddenly, making her jump. A text from her coworker. Forgot your cardigan at the store again. Want me to drop it off tomorrow? She let out a shaky laugh, realizing how tightly wound she was. Yet even as she replied, her gaze drifted once more to the window, to the shadows outside that seemed just a little too still. At the mansion, Luca climbed into Damien's lap, holding his toy car up proudly. Papa, can Elena come again, please? Damien's expression softened only for his son. You like her? Yes. Luca's eyes shone. She's kind. She listens. She didn't get scared like other people. Damien's thoughts darkened. She didn't get scared. That detail struck deeper than he wanted to admit. He brushed a hand over his son's hair, silent for a long moment. Finally, he murmured, Perhaps she will. Days passed. Elena noticed subtle things. A black sedan parked down the street, the same man appearing at the corner cafe. The feeling of being watched grew undeniable. One evening, as she locked up the bookstore, a figure stepped out of the shadows. Tall, suited, unmistakable, her breath caught. Miss Walker, the man said smoothly, his tone polite but unyielding. Mr. Damien requests your presence, her heart thudded. She tried to steady her voice. I don't owe him anything. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. No, but he insists. Behind him, the sedan door opened. Inside, Elena glimpsed the leather interior, the world of power she had tried to walk away from. The choice wasn't really hers. With her pulse racing, Elena stepped into the car, realizing the truth she had been trying to deny. The mafia boss wasn't finished with her, and perhaps she wasn't finished with him either. The car ride was silent, the kind of silence that pressed down heavy, making Elena's pulse louder in her own ears. The city blurred past the tinted windows, neon lights reflecting across her uneasy face. She gripped her bag tightly in her lap, every instinct screaming that she should have refused. But how could she? Saying no to a man like Damien wasn't an option. When the car finally slowed, the iron gates of the mansion came into view once again. The memory of that first night rushed back. The glimmering chandelier, the cold marble, the weight of Damien's stare. Her stomach tightened. The driver pulled to a stop. This way, Miss Walker, he said, opening the door. Elena stepped out, her heels clicking against the stone driveway. This time there was no Luca to cling to her hand, no innocent reason to soften the atmosphere. She was here because Damien wanted her here. Inside, the mansion seemed quieter than before. The grand hall was dimly lit, the chandeliers casting golden pools of light across the floor. A pair of guards stood at the edges like statues, watching her every move. And then, he appeared. Damien descended the staircase with measured steps, every inch of him radiating power. His suit was midnight black, his tie undone just enough to suggest he was at home, though no less commanding. His eyes, sharp as steel, locked onto Elena the moment he reached the bottom. "Elena," he said, her name rolling off his tongue like a test, a taste. "I wasn't sure you would come." She straightened her shoulders, forcing calm into her voice. "You didn't exactly give me a choice." A flicker of amusement crossed his face, gone as quickly as it came. "True." He gestured toward a side room. "Join me." Reluctantly, she followed him into what looked like a private lounge. Dark leather chairs, shelves of aged whiskey, a fire crackling in the hearth. The atmosphere was heavy with masculine strength, yet oddly intimate. Damien poured 2 glasses of wine and set one before her. "You intrigue me, Elena Walker. Do you know how rare that is?" She hesitated before answering. "I didn't come here to intrigue you. I only helped your son." His jaw tightened slightly, but his eyes never left her. "And for that you have my gratitude. But you also stepped into a world you don't understand. That makes you interesting." Elena bristled. "I don't want to be part of your world." He leaned back in his chair, studying her as though her defiance entertained him. "You think you have a choice? You returned my son to me. That alone ties you to me whether you like it or not." Her pulse quickened. "That sounds more like a threat than gratitude." Damien's lips curved, the faintest hint of a smirk. "It's both." For a moment silence filled the room, broken only by the soft crackle of the fire. His presence was overwhelming, yet beneath the intimidation, Elena sensed something else. A fracture in his armor. She lowered her gaze to her glass, her voice quiet. "Luca, he's a sweet boy. He deserves better than growing up surrounded by guns and guards." Damien's eyes narrowed, his expression darkening. But instead of anger, his voice dropped, softer, heavier. "You think I don't know that? You think I haven't bled to make sure he survives in a world that would devour him otherwise?" His words hit like a confession, raw and unfiltered. For the first time, Elena glimpsed the man beneath the mafia boss, a father, desperate and broken in ways he would never admit out loud. Their eyes met, and something charged hung between them. Danger, yes, but also something unspoken. Elena's chest tightened. She wanted to look away, to retreat, but she couldn't. Damien's gaze held her captive. Finally, he leaned forward, his voice low, steady. "You've stepped into my world, Elena, and whether you walk back out depends on you." A shiver ran down her spine. She had no idea what he truly meant, but one thing was certain. This was no simple dinner invitation. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. The fire's glow danced across Damien's sharp features, casting shadows that made him look both alluring and menacing. Elena sat stiff in her chair, clutching the stem of her untouched glass of wine. The weight of his words still echoed in her ears. "Whether you walk back out depends on you." Her throat tightened. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Damien leaned forward, his elbows resting casually on his knees, though his eyes carried the intensity of a storm. "You crossed paths with me, Elena. That doesn't happen by accident. People who enter my world rarely walk away unchanged." Her breath caught. "I didn't ask for this. I just helped a child who was lost." His gaze softened ever so slightly at the mention of Luca. "And in doing so, you touched the most vulnerable part of my life. My son is my blood, my only weakness. Do you understand how dangerous that makes you?" Her pulse quickened, fear threading through her veins. "Dangerous. To me or to you?" A dark smile tugged at his lips. "Both." The air between them grew thick, charged with something unspoken. Elena shifted uncomfortably, desperate to break the tension. "If helping your son put me in danger, then tell me what I need to do to stay safe. I don't want any part of this mafia life you lead." Damien tilted his head, studying her as though she were a puzzle he wasn't sure he wanted solved. "Safety is an illusion, Elena. Especially once the wrong people know your name." Her blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" He swirled the wine in his glass, his tone casual yet deliberate. "My enemies watch me, They watch Luca. They'll be asking questions about the kind-hearted woman who brought him home. To them, you're not just a stranger. You're leverage. Alina sat rigid in the leather chair, the crackle of the fire doing little to ease the tension tightening her chest. Damien's words still echoed in her mind. Whether you walk back out depends on you. Her lips parted, but no words came. What could she possibly say to a man who lived in shadows, a man whose very presence commanded both fear and fascination? Damien rose slowly from his seat. Even that simple motion carried weight. Like the room itself tilted toward him, he crossed to the fireplace, sliding one hand into his pocket as the other reached for a silver lighter resting on the mantel. With a sharp flick, a flame danced to life. He lit a cigar, inhaled deeply, then exhaled smoke that curled like ghosts in the dim light. "You helped my son," he said at last, his voice low and deliberate. "That makes you valuable to me. But it also paints a target on your back." Elena blinked. "A target?" He turned, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "In this city, enemies don't need much of a reason. They watch me. They watch Luca. Now they will watch you." A chill ran through her, sinking deep into her bones. She gripped the edge of her chair. "I never asked for this. I just wanted to help a boy who was lost." His jaw flexed. "And in doing so, you stepped into a war you don't even see." Elena's heartbeat thundered in her ears. She wanted to deny it, to say she would walk away, but a gnawing truth whispered otherwise. Damien was right. Already 2 guards had escorted her here. Already, her name was on his lips, her face etched into his memory. There was no going back to the life she had yesterday. Damien took a slow drag from his cigar, then extinguished it against a crystal tray. He walked toward her, each step deliberate. "You're not safe anymore, Elena. Not unless you're under my protection." She shook her head, forcing a bitter laugh that cracked under pressure. "Protection? That sounds a lot like ownership." His gaze sharpened, but he didn't flinch. "You mistake one for the other. I don't own people." He paused, leaning down just enough that his shadow draped over her. "But I do protect what matters to me." Her breath caught. For a fleeting second, something softer glimmered in his eyes, hidden beneath layers of steel, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "Why me?" she whispered, more to herself than to him. Damien tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve. "Because you didn't run the first time. Most would have. You stood your ground in this house. You looked me in the eye." Her throat tightened. She remembered that night. The guards, the fear, the weight of his stare. She had been terrified, yes, but she hadn't bowed her head. Somehow she hadn't been able to. Elena rose from her chair, needing space, needing air. She crossed to the window, the heavy curtains brushing her shoulders as she pushed them aside. Outside, the ground stretched wide and endless, guarded by iron fences and watchful men. It wasn't freedom. It was a gilded cage. She turned back to him. "I can't live like this. I'm just a teacher. A normal woman. I don't belong in your world." Damien's voice cut through her protest like a blade. "Normal?" He took a step closer, his tone growing harder. "Normal doesn't exist once you've crossed paths with me. And whether you accept it or not, Elena, you're already part of my world now." Her stomach knotted. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him he was wrong. But even as the words clawed at her throat, something inside her resisted, because deep down, she knew he wasn't lying. The firelight flickered, shadows dancing across his face. Damien's expression softened by the smallest degree. "I don't expect you to trust me, not yet. But I need you to understand this." He paused, his voice dropping low, almost tender. "I will not let anyone harm you." For a moment, Elena forgot to breathe. The intensity in his eyes stripped her defenses bare, leaving her exposed in a way she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just a vow of protection. It was a claim. Her pulse hammered. She tore her gaze away, struggling to gather herself. "And if I say I don't want your protection?" Damien straightened, his expression unreadable, but his words were sharp as glass. "Then you're a fool. Because my enemies won't ask what you want. They'll only see leverage, and I don't allow leverage to exist." The room fell into heavy silence. Elena's chest rose and fell with quick, shallow breaths. Every instinct told her to walk out, to run before it was too late. But her legs wouldn't move. Somewhere between fear and fascination, she was trapped. Not by his guards, not by the mansion, but by him. Finally, Damien stepped back, granting her space. His tone shifted, softer but no less commanding. Go home, Elena, for now, but know this. You'll be watched. My men will keep you safe, and if you ever find yourself in danger, call me, no matter the hour. He slipped a card from his pocket and set it on the table. A simple card, a single number. Elena stared at it, her throat dry. She should refuse. She should walk away, but she didn't. She reached out, her fingers brushing the smooth edge, and in that small, fateful act, she sealed something unspoken between them. Damien's gaze lingered on her, steady, unreadable. We'll see each other again soon, Elena Walker. That much, I promise. And in her heart she knew. His promises were not made lightly. The next morning, Elena stood at her apartment window, staring down at the street below. The city bustled with its usual rhythm, cars honking, people hurrying to work, the occasional bark of a stray dog. But beneath it all, something felt off. She tugged her cardigan tighter around her shoulders and scanned the sidewalk again. That black SUV parked across the street. It had been there for over an hour. 2 men sat inside, sunglasses hiding their eyes, pretending to be uninterested. Her pulse quickened. Damien's voice echoed in her head. You'll be watched. My men will keep you safe. Safe. Was that what this was? Or was it surveillance? The line blurred too easily. Elena turned away from the window, exhaling sharply. She had classes to teach, papers to grade, and a life to live. She couldn't spend every second wondering if mafia shadows lingered outside her door. Still, she double-checked the locks before leaving. The school day passed in a haze. She smiled at her students, corrected homework, read aloud from classic novels, but her mind was elsewhere. Every time footsteps echoed in the hall, her head snapped up. Every time a car slowed near the playground fence, her stomach clenched. At lunch, her friend and fellow teacher, Marissa, noticed the tension in her shoulders. You okay? Marissa asked, popping open a can of soda. You look like you haven't slept in days. Elena forced a smile. Just a lot on my mind. Guy trouble? Marissa teased, raising a brow. If only she knew. Elena shook her head quickly. No, nothing like that. But the denial left a sour taste in her mouth. Because wasn't that exactly what this was? Trouble? Wrapped in the form of a man she couldn't stop thinking about? The school day ended. Elena gathered her things and stepped out into the chilly dusk. The sky burned with streaks of orange and purple, a beauty she barely noticed. Because there it was again. Another car idling too long by the curb. She gripped her keys tighter. Her breath puffed out in quick clouds as she crossed the parking lot, scanning every shadow. Her chest tightened with every step. Elena Walker? The voice was smooth, unfamiliar, and too close. She spun. A man stood a few feet away, dressed in a crisp suit that didn't quite mask the menace in his eyes. His smile was thin, practiced wrong. Yes? She asked cautiously, her throat dry. He took a step closer. You're quite hard to find, but worth the effort, I think. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't one of Damien's men. She knew it instinctively. His presence felt different, predatory, not protective. Before she could reply, the screech of tires cut through the air. The black SUV from that morning whipped around the corner, stopping with brutal precision. 2 of Damien's men leapt out, weapons glinting beneath their jackets. Step away from her, one barked. The stranger's smile never faltered. He tipped an imaginary hat toward Elena, then backed away slowly. Another time, Miss Walker. And then he vanished into the twilight crowd. Elena's knees trembled. One of the guards moved to her side, his voice firm but not unkind. You're coming with us. I don't even know who that was, she stammered. You don't need to, the guard said, steering her toward the SUV. Mr. Moretti will handle it. Damien. Of course. Her hands shook as she slid into the back seat. The door slammed shut, sealing her inside. The city lights blurred past again, just like that night she'd first been taken to his mansion. Only this time there was no illusion of choice, because the truth had finally sunk in. Damien was right. She was part of his world now, and his enemies knew it. The SUV pulled up to the mansion gates, and Elena's heart pounded as the iron bars closed behind them. She was escorted inside quickly, straight to the lounge where Damien waited. He stood by the window, his silhouette cut against the night sky. When he turned, his expression was carved in stone. "Who?" he demanded. Elena swallowed hard. "I don't know. He just appeared. He knew my name." Damien's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with barely contained fury. "Valenti's men," he muttered almost to himself. "He's testing me." He crossed the room in a few strides, stopping inches from her. His hand rose, not in threat, but to steady her trembling arm. "I warned you," he said softly, his voice carrying both anger and something darker, fear. "This is why you can't walk away, Elena. They'll come for you to get to me." Her breath caught, her eyes searching his. "So what happens now?" Damien's grip on her arm tightened just slightly, his gaze burning into hers. "Now," he said, his tone like iron, "you stay where I can protect you, whether you want to or not." Elena's heels clicked across the marble floor, the sound echoing in the vast, intimidating halls of Damien's mansion. She hadn't meant to return here, hadn't wanted to, but the events of the night left her little choice. The stranger, the threat, the look in Damien's eyes when she told him. All of it led her back into this place she swore she'd never see again. 2 guards followed at a discreet distance, not speaking, not even meeting her gaze. But she felt their presence like invisible chains, guiding her deeper into the house. Damien walked ahead, his stride purposeful, his shoulders tense. He hadn't said much since she arrived, but the silence surrounding him was heavy, like the calm before a storm. Finally, they entered the private lounge. The fire glowed low in the hearth, shadows dancing across the leather chairs and shelves of expensive liquor. Damien dismissed the guards with a sharp flick of his hand. The door shut behind them. Elena folded her arms, trying to hold on to some semblance of control. "You can't just drag me here every time something goes wrong in your world." Damien turned, his expression unreadable. "Drag you?" "Elena, you'd be dead right now if my men hadn't arrived when they did." Her chest tightened. He wasn't wrong, but the way he said it, the certainty, the ownership, ignited a spark of resistance. "I don't belong here. This isn't my life." He closed the distance between them, his eyes sharp as steel. "It is now." She swallowed hard, forcing herself not to back away. "I won't be locked in a cage, Damien." Something flickered in his gaze, something almost pained. But his voice stayed firm. "Better a gilded cage than a grave." The words landed like a blow. Her breath caught, anger mixing with the undeniable truth of it. She hated that he was right. She hated even more that some part of her, the part that remembered Luca's smile, that had glimpsed the brokenness in Damien's voice when he spoke of protecting his son, was relieved to be here. Elena broke eye contact, moving toward the fire. Her hands trembled slightly as she rubbed them together, though the room was warm. "So what? I just stay here under guard until your war is over?" Damien's footsteps echoed as he came closer, stopping just behind her. "Until it's safe." She let out a sharp laugh. "Will it ever be safe, Damien?" "With you?" Silence. Then, softly, almost like an admission, "I don't know." The honesty in his voice startled her. She turned to face him, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked less like an untouchable king and more like a man burdened by the weight of his own empire. Their eyes locked. The firelight cast golden shadows across his features, highlighting the sharp lines of his jaw, the tension in his expression. "Elena," he said, her name almost a whisper. "I can't lose you. Not to them. Not to anyone." Her heart stuttered. The intensity in his words stole the air from her lungs. She should have been furious. She should have demanded he let her go. But instead, she stood frozen, her pulse racing as the space between them thickened with something dangerous and undeniable. "Why?" she whispered, barely able to trust her voice. Damien's jaw flexed, his eyes burning with something he fought to contain. "Because the moment you walked into my life, you changed it. You stood in my house unafraid to challenge me. You looked at me, not at the money, not at the power, but at me. No one does that, Elena, no one." Her throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to push him away, but the words tangled inside her. Damien stepped closer, so close she could feel the heat radiating from him. His hand rose, hovering near her cheek but not quite touching. The restraint in that single motion made her heart ache more than if he'd actually closed the distance. "You think this is a cage," he murmured. "But it's not. It's the only place in this city where you're safe, the only place where I can protect you." Her lips parted, 1,000 protests dying before they could form. She hated the truth in his words. She hated the way her body betrayed her, how her pulse quickened, how her chest rose and fell too fast, how a part of her didn't want him to move away. Finally, she turned her head, breaking the moment. "I don't know if I can live like this." His hand dropped, but his voice remained steady. "Then I'll convince you, one day at a time." Elena closed her eyes, the weight of his vow pressing against her soul. She was caught, between the fear of what his world meant and the pull of something she couldn't yet name. The fire cracked, the silence stretching between them. And in that silence, she knew one thing for certain. Whatever this was, this dangerous, fragile connection, it was only the beginning. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through tall arched windows, the kind that belonged more to castles than homes. For a moment, disoriented and half asleep, she thought she was dreaming. Then she saw the velvet drapes, the carved oak dresser, the expensive armchair tucked by the fire. This wasn't her modest apartment. This was Damien Moretti's mansion. Her stomach sank as reality set in. She sat up, pressing a hand to her forehead. The events of the last 24 hours came rushing back. The stranger at the school parking lot, the guards, Damien's unshakable warning. And now, a knock on the door startled her. "Miss Walker," a woman's voice, polite but firm. "Breakfast is ready downstairs." Elena hesitated before answering. "Thank you. I'll be down in a bit." When she finally entered the dining hall, she froze. The long tables stretched endlessly, gleaming with silverware and crystal glasses. But what caught her attention wasn't the grandeur. It was Luca, sitting at the far end with a plate of pancakes and a messy grin. "Miss Elena," he called, his voice bright. "Come sit by me." Her heart softened instantly. Whatever shadows haunted this house, Luca was its light. She crossed the room, ignoring the way 2 guards at the door tracked her every step, and slid into the chair beside him. "Pancakes?" she asked, smiling despite herself. "With extra syrup," Luca said proudly, showing off sticky fingers. She laughed, reaching for a napkin. "Looks like you need a little less syrup, if you ask me." Their laughter filled the hall until Damien's footsteps entered. Elena's head snapped up. Damien strode in, every inch of him the untouchable mafia boss, but his eyes softened when they landed on Luca. And, briefly, on her. "You're awake," he said, his tone smoother than she expected. Elena straightened. "I was planning on leaving." "You're not," he cut in, taking the seat across from her. His voice was calm but final. "It's too dangerous." Her jaw tightened. "I can't just abandon my life. My students, they'll understand," Damien said, cutting his steak with practiced precision. "You'll return when it's safe." The casual way he dismissed her protest infuriated her, but Luca tugged her sleeve before she could argue. "Stay, Miss Elena. Please, it's fun when you're here." Her heart melted. How could she resist him? The day unfolded strangely. Guards shadowed her at every corner. The staff treated her with polite formality, though she could feel their curious stares. She wandered through sprawling halls lined with oil paintings, marble staircases, and doors that led to rooms she didn't dare enter. It was beautiful, yes, but it wasn't freedom. In the garden, Luca showed her his favorite hiding spot beneath a willow tree. They sat together on the soft grass, his laughter chasing away her unease for a brief while. "You know," she said softly, brushing a leaf from his hair, "you're a lot like your father." Luca tilted his head. "Everyone says that, but you don't look at me the way they look at him." Her chest tightened. "And how do they look at him? Like they're scared, or like they owe him something." Luca's eyes, wide and innocent, searched hers. "But you just look at me like I'm me." Elena hugged him, her throat aching. "That's because you are." That evening, Damien found her in the library, surrounded by shelves of leather-bound books. She was reading, though her eyes barely skimmed the pages. "You're adjusting," he observed, leaning against the doorway. Elena snapped the book shut. "That's one word for it." Damien stepped closer, the quiet authority in his movements both intimidating and magnetic. "You think of this place as a prison, but it doesn't have to be." She rose, facing him. "You've taken away my choices, Damien. That's what makes it a prison." His eyes darkened. "No. I've taken away your danger." The air between them thickened, charged with an unspoken tension. She hated that her body reacted before her mind, her pulse racing, her breath catching. "Luca adores you," Damien said, his voice lower now, almost confessional. "That alone is reason enough for me to keep you here." Her heart wavered. For all his ruthlessness, there it was again, the father beneath the mafia boss. But before she could reply, a guard burst into the room. "Sir, there's movement near the east perimeter. Unknown men, armed." Elena froze, fear seizing her chest. Damien's expression hardened instantly. The softness vanished, replaced by cold command. "Double the patrols." "No one gets in," he ordered. His voice was steel, his posture unshakable. Then he turned to Elena, his gaze burning with warning. "Do you see now? This is why you can't leave." Elena's breath shuddered out. For the first time, the truth was undeniable. She wasn't just caught in his world, she was already under fire from it. The night fell heavy over the mansion. Elena sat in her room trying to read, but the words swam uselessly across the page. She couldn't stop thinking about what the guard had said earlier. Unknown men, armed. Her body told her to stay calm, but her mind wouldn't listen. She kept picturing the stranger from the school parking lot, his thin smile, the way he'd known her name. A sudden sound cracked through the stillness. Not thunder, not fireworks. Gunfire. Elena shot to her feet, the book tumbling from her lap. Her heart leapt to her throat as shouts echoed from outside. She rushed to the window, her breath fogging the glass. In the distance, beyond the iron fence, she saw figures darting through the darkness. Shadows with weapons, muzzle flashes lighting the night. The guards returned fire, their movements sharp, controlled. The air itself seemed to tremble with violence. "Elena!" She spun. Damien filled the doorway, his voice low but urgent. He was dressed in black, a gun holstered at his side, his expression hard as steel. "Get away from the window," he ordered. Her legs obeyed before her mind could protest. Damien crossed the room in long strides, seizing her hand. His grip was strong, grounding and terrifying all at once. "What's happening?" she whispered, her chest tight. "An attack," he said simply. "Valenti's men, testing the perimeter." Her blood ran cold. "They're here for me?" "They're here for us," Damien corrected, pulling her into the hall. "And they're about to regret it." The mansion was alive with chaos. Guards moved swiftly through the corridors, radios crackling, weapons in hand. Elena clung to Damien's arm as he led her down the sweeping staircase, his presence cutting through the panic like a blade. "Where's Luca?" she asked, fear lacing her voice. "Safe," Damien replied. "He's in the panic room." The reassurance steadied her, but only slightly. They reached the grand hall, and Damien turned to face her. "You stay here," he commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. Her eyes widened. "Here? While men with guns are outside?" His gaze locked onto hers, burning with intensity. "You're safest under my roof. Trust me." And then he was gone, striding toward the front doors, where the roar of violence spilled in from the night. Minutes stretched into hours. Or maybe it just felt that way. Elena pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering as the sounds of battle raged outside. Gunshots cracked. Shouts pierced the night. Once she thought she heard a scream. She wanted to run, to hide, but her feet wouldn't move. The heavy front doors swung open, and Damien strode back inside. His suit was smeared with dirt, his knuckles bloodied, but his stride was steady, unbroken. "It's over," he said, his voice like thunder calming after a storm. Elena sagged against the wall, relief crashing through her so hard it nearly stole her breath. Damien's eyes swept over her, taking in her pale face, the way her hands trembled. For a brief second, his expression softened. "You're safe," he said again, quieter this time. But Elena shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. No, I'm not. Not really, am I? Damien closed the distance between them, his hand lifting to brush a strand of hair from her face. The touch was tender, almost fragile, belying the ruthlessness she had just seen outside. No, he admitted. Not while men like Valenti still breathe. Her throat tightened. And how long will that be? His jaw hardened, but his voice was steady, cold with conviction. Until I make sure they don't. Elena shivered. Not from fear of him, but from the raw promise in his words. He wasn't just fighting to protect his empire. He was fighting for Luca, for her. She wanted to hate him for pulling her into this world. She wanted to scream at him for chaining her to danger. But as his hand lingered near her cheek, steadying her, the words tangled inside her. Instead, all she could whisper was, "I don't think I can survive this." Damien's eyes burned into hers. And for once, there was no mask, no armor, just the raw truth of a man who had seen too much, lost too much, and refused to lose again. "You won't have to survive it alone," he said softly. "Not while I'm breathing." That night, Elena lay awake in the guest chamber, staring at the ceiling. The echoes of gunfire still rang in her ears. She thought of Luca, sleeping safely in the hidden room. She thought of Damien, standing against the storm with blood on his hands. And she thought of herself, caught in the middle, trapped between terror and something far more dangerous, the pull of a man she shouldn't want. Outside, the city slept. But Elena knew better. This was only the beginning. The mansion was quiet again, but the silence didn't bring peace. It was the uneasy kind, heavy, waiting, full of echoes that refused to die. Elena sat in the library, curled into the corner of a leather chair. A blanket wrapped around her shoulders, though the chill she felt had nothing to do with the air. The memory of the gunfire still pulsed in her chest, each crack of the shots replaying like a cruel reminder. The door creaked, and she looked up. Damien entered, his presence commanding as always, though exhaustion shadowed his face. His suit jacket was gone, his white shirt undone at the collar. His hair was damp, as though he had just washed the blood and smoke from his skin. "You should be sleeping," he said. Elena gave a bitter little laugh. "And you?" He ignored the jab, walking past the shelves lined with leather-bound volumes until he stood near her chair. The firelight cast his features in shades of gold and shadow. "You don't have to be afraid," he said, voice calm but edged. Her gaze snapped to his, fire flaring through the fear. "Don't I? Because it sounded like a war outside your house tonight." His jaw tightened. "It wasn't a war. Just a message." Her heart stumbled. "A message? That..." She gestured helplessly toward the window. "That was bullets, Damien. People could have died. People probably did die." His silence confirmed it. Elena pulled the blanket tighter, her body trembling despite herself. "This is insane. I was just trying to help a lost little boy. And now I'm, what? Living in the middle of a battlefield?" For once, Damien didn't offer a sharp retort. He lowered himself into the chair across from her, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, his eyes locked onto hers with unnerving intensity. "You helped my son," he said quietly. "That means you're part of this now. Like it or not." Her breath caught. "I didn't choose this." His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Neither did I." The words hung in the air between them. Elena studied him, searching for cracks in the armor. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the weariness beneath his control. And for the first time she wondered, what would it be like to carry that much power and that much danger all the time? Her voice softened. "Do you ever get tired of it?" His brows drew together. "Of what?" "This." She gestured again, but more gently this time. "The fights. The threats. Always watching over your shoulder." Damien's gaze dropped to the fire, flames reflecting in his eyes. "Tired doesn't matter. Men like me don't get to stop. If we do, someone else takes everything. My family, my son, and now..." He paused, his eyes flicking back to her. Elena's chest tightened. He didn't finish the sentence, but the meaning was clear. "And now you." Her pulse quickened, confusion and heat tangling in her chest. "Why me?" she whispered before she could stop herself. "Why risk more for me?" Damien leaned closer, his voice a low growl edged with something raw. "Because the second I saw you, I knew you weren't just some stranger who wandered into our lives. You're different. You don't belong in my world, but somehow, you make me want to believe I can still have more than blood and war." Elena's breath caught. She should have recoiled. She should have stood up, stormed out, demanded he sent her home, but she couldn't move. His words pinned her to the chair, dangerous and intoxicating. The moment stretched, fragile as glass. Then the sound of small footsteps echoed from the hallway. "Papa?" Luca appeared in the doorway, clutching a stuffed bear, his big eyes wide with lingering fear. Damien was on his feet instantly, his hard expression melting into something softer. He crouched down, pulling his son into his arms. "It's all right," he murmured, his voice gentler than Elena had ever heard. "It's over now." Elena's heart twisted. For all his ruthlessness, for all his power and danger, here was a man who loved his child fiercely. She saw it in the way Damien held Luca, steady and protective. Her chest ached with conflicting emotions. She wanted to hate him for dragging her into his world, but every time she looked at him with his son, hate slipped further from reach. Later, when Luca had fallen asleep again, Damien returned to the library. His eyes met Elena's, the weight of unspoken things stretching between them. "We'll increase security," he said simply. "No one will touch you while you're under my protection." Elena shook her head slowly. "But that's the problem, isn't it? Being near you is exactly what makes me a target." Damien didn't flinch. "Then let them come." His voice carried no fear, only certainty. A certainty that terrified her more than the gunfire ever could, because it wasn't just his world pulling her in anymore. It was him. The morning came slowly, spilling pale light over the sprawling estate. Elena hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the gunfire again, echoing in the hollow of her chest. She found herself in the garden after sunrise, needing air. The roses glistened with dew, the air heavy with the scent of earth and silence. She tried to draw calm from it, but unease clung to her like a shadow. The crunch of footsteps on gravel made her turn. Damien was there. Of course he was. Even in daylight, dressed in a crisp black suit, he carried an aura that made the air thicken. His presence wasn't just physical, it pressed on her mind, her heart. "You shouldn't wander alone," he said, his tone not unkind, but firm. Elena bristled. "Am I a guest here or a prisoner?" His gaze lingered on her face, unreadable, before he stepped closer. "You're someone I don't intend to lose." Her breath caught, her heart giving a painful twist. She wanted to shout at him, tell him not to say things like that, but the words tangled in her throat. Instead, she turned away, looking at the roses. "I don't belong here." "No," he agreed, "but I want you here." The honesty in his voice struck her harder than any command could have. Later that day, Damien brought her into a part of the mansion she hadn't seen before. Past the polished halls and chandeliers lay a narrow staircase descending into shadow. "Where are we going?" Elena asked, her steps hesitant as she followed. "To the heart of it," he said simply. The basement opened into a cavernous underground chamber, stone walls lined with maps, safes, crates stacked with weapons. Men stood at attention when Damien entered, bowing their heads with respect. Elena's stomach turned. This wasn't just a home, it was a fortress. "A war room, why are you showing me this?" she whispered. "Because if you're under my protection," Damien said, his voice steady, "you need to know the truth, about who I am, about the world you've stepped into." Her eyes swept the room. The guns, the guards, the silent efficiency of men preparing for violence. It was suffocating, terrifying. "This isn't protection," she said, her voice shaking. "It's a trap." His eyes narrowed, but not in anger. "In something closer to pain. A trap would mean I wanted to cage you. That's not what this is." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "This is survival. My son's, yours, mine." Her heart pounded. "And what about love, Damien? Where does that fit into all this?" The word hung in the air like a live wire. For the first time, he faltered. His lips parted, but no sound came. Then slowly he said, "Love doesn't survive in my world. But still, when I look at you, I wonder if it could." Her pulse skittered. She should have run then, put distance between them. But instead, she found herself frozen, caught in the dangerous tenderness of his gaze. That night, Elena couldn't stay still. She roamed the halls, her mind a storm. Damien's words echoed in her ears, fighting with her fear. She ended up outside Luca's room, peeking in at the boy fast asleep. Innocent, unaware. He deserved better than this world. Can't sleep? The voice behind her made her jump. She turned to see Marco, the tall, dark-eyed man who seemed to always be at Damien's side. He leaned casually against the wall, but there was something sharp in his expression. Not really, Elena admitted cautiously. Marco studied her, his gaze thoughtful. You're different. He never lets outsiders this close. Her pulse quickened. What are you saying? I'm saying, Marco lowered his voice, some men don't like it. They think you're a weakness. The words chilled her to the bone. Who? She asked. Marco gave a small, grim smile. You'll see soon enough. Then he walked away, leaving her with her stomach twisting in dread. When she returned to her room, Elena pressed her back to the door and shut her eyes. The fear was real. The danger was real. But what terrified her most wasn't the threat outside the walls. It was the way her heart had started to beat faster whenever Damien looked at her. It was the realization that somewhere in the middle of the gunfire, the secrets, and the shadows, she was falling for him. And she knew if she did, there might be no way back. The next evening carried a strange weight in the air. Elena could feel it even before she left her room, a tension humming through the mansion like wires pulled too tight. She found Damien in the dining hall, standing by the window with a glass of whiskey in his hand. His posture was straight, commanding as always, but there was something restless in the way his jaw tightened, the way his fingers drummed against the glass. You sense it too, she said softly, surprising herself. He turned, his eyes locking on hers. Sense what? That something's coming, she whispered. For a long moment he said nothing. Then finally, yes, the honesty of it made her chest ache. Dinner was quiet. Luca chatted happily, oblivious to the heavy silence between the adults. Elena tried to smile at him, but her appetite was gone. Across the table, Damien barely touched his food, his attention flicking toward the windows, the doors, the shadows. When the meal ended, Marco appeared at Damien's side, murmuring something too low for Elena to hear. But she saw the way Damien's eyes narrowed, the way his knuckles tightened around the table's edge. What is it? She asked, her voice sharper than she meant. Damien stood. Nothing you need to worry about. But Elena had learned enough by now to know when he was lying. Hours later, she wandered the hall, restless. That's when she heard it. Two voices, hushed but urgent, slipping from the edge of the corridor. She froze, pressing herself into the shadows. I'm telling you, he's distracted, one voice whispered. That woman's got his head turned. Her blood ran cold. They were talking about her. He's softer than he used to be, another voice replied. It's only a matter of time before someone takes advantage. Maybe we should. A beat of silence. Then a low laugh. Not maybe, definitely. Elena's heart slammed against her ribs. She clamped a hand over her mouth, backing away slowly before they could hear her. She ran straight to Damien's office, her pulse wild. He looked up from a stack of papers as she burst inside. What is it? His voice was sharp, alert. Your men, she gasped. I heard them. They think you're weak. They think because of me they can betray you. For a moment, silence. Then Damien pushed back from his desk and rose to his full height, eyes blazing. Who? I don't know their names, Elena admitted, her hands trembling. But I heard them. They said you've changed, that you're not as ruthless as you once were. Damien's expression darkened, a storm brewing behind his eyes. They're not wrong, he said finally. Her breath caught. What do you mean? He moved closer, his presence filling the room. I have changed. Ever since you walked into my life, Elena, I've wanted things I haven't wanted in years. Peace. Something normal. But in my world, normal is weakness, and weakness is fatal. She swallowed hard. Then send me away. If I'm the reason— No, his voice cut like a blade. They'll never touch you. Not while I'm alive. The raw force in his words shook her to her core. That night, Damien gathered his inner circle in the underground chamber. Elena wasn't supposed to be there, but she watched from the edge of the stairwell, unseen. "I hear whispers," Damien said, his voice cold and lethal. "I hear betrayal. Let me make this clear. Any man under my roof who doubts my strength will not see another sunrise." The room was silent. Men shifted uneasily, but none spoke. Elena's stomach twisted. The ruthlessness in his tone was terrifying. Yet what chilled her more was the realization that this was who he truly was, the man the world feared. And still, her heart ached for him. When the meeting ended, Damien found her waiting at the top of the stairs. "You shouldn't have listened," he said. "I had to," she whispered. "I had to know what kind of man you really are." He stepped closer, his gaze burning into hers. "And what do you see?" Her voice trembled. "I see a man who could destroy anyone who crosses him. But I also see the father who tucks his son in at night. The man who—" She stopped, the words catching in her throat. "The man who what?" He pressed, his voice low. Her heart thundered. "The man who could make me fall in love with him, even though I know it might kill me." For a moment, Damien froze, as though her words struck something deep inside him. Then his hand lifted, brushing against her cheek with unexpected gentleness. "You think love makes you weak," he murmured. "But maybe it's the only thing keeping me alive." Elena's breath shook. She knew she should run, but when his lips hovered near hers, close enough for her to feel the heat of his breath, she didn't move, and for the first time, she wondered if betrayal from within was the least of her dangers. The storm broke 2 nights later. Elena had been reading to Luca in his room, her voice soft over the pages of a children's book, when the door creaked open. Marco stood there, tall and sharp-eyed, watching. His expression was unreadable, but his presence filled the room like a shadow. "Boss needs you," he said to Elena. Her heart skipped. "Now?" "Yes," he said, "it's important." Elena glanced at Luca, who clutched her arm. His big brown eyes were full of worry. "Go on," Marco said more gently. "I'll stay with him." Something in his tone unsettled her, but she forced a smile for Luca's sake. "I'll be back soon," she whispered, kissing his forehead before slipping out. Damien was in the underground chamber when she arrived, pacing before a table littered with files. His eyes were steel when he looked up. "What took you so long?" Marco said. She stopped, her chest tightening. "Wait, you didn't send him?" Damien's body went rigid. "No," the air cracked with dread. Without another word, Damien bolted for the stairs, Elena at his heels. They reached Luca's room in seconds, but it was empty. The window was open, curtains fluttering in the night breeze. Elena's scream caught in her throat. "No, no, no." Damien's face turned to stone, his jaw set, eyes burning with a fury that could kill. "Marco," he growled. The next hour was a blur of chaos. Guards spread across the estate, radios buzzing, engines roaring as Damien's men scoured the city. Elena clutched the edge of the desk in his office, trembling. "This is my fault," she whispered, tears spilling hot down her cheeks. "If I hadn't—" Damien spun on her, slamming his hands onto the desk. "Don't you dare blame yourself. This is on him. He betrayed me. He betrayed my son." His voice shook with rage, but beneath it was something more raw. Fear. For all his power, for all his ruthlessness, Damien's world had cracked. His boy was gone. Hours later, a phone rang. Damien snatched it up, his voice a deadly calm. On the other end, Marco's voice slithered through the line. "Don't take it personally, boss. It's just business. You've grown soft. The men don't respect you anymore. Where is he?" Damien's voice was low, dangerous, a chuckle. "Safe, for now. But you'll do what I say if you want him back." Elena pressed her fist to her mouth, holding back a sob. "What do you want?" Damien asked. "The Empire," Marco said simply. "Step down. Hand it over, or Luca disappears forever." The silence that followed was suffocating. Elena could feel Damien's rage radiating through the room. But when he spoke again, his voice was controlled, chilling. "You made one mistake, Marco." "And what's that?" "You thought taking my son would break me, but you've just given me all the reason I need to end you." The line went dead. Elena moved toward him, her hands trembling. "Damien, what if he hurts Luca?" For the first time, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Fear. The kind of fear only a father could know. "I won't let that happen," he said. His voice cracked just slightly. "I can't." Elena reached for him without thinking, her hand brushing his arm. "Then let me help." His head snapped up. "No, this is war. You stay here where it's safe." But she shook her head fiercely, tears burning. "Safe? You think I can sit in this mansion, waiting, while that little boy, your boy, is out there terrified? Damien, I have to help. You need someone you can trust. Please." The room pulsed with silence. His eyes searched hers, fierce and unyielding. But beneath the fury, he saw it. Her courage. Finally, he nodded once. "Then we end this together." That night, Elena found herself in the back seat of Damien's armored car as they sped into the city. Her heart pounded, but her mind was clear. For the first time, she wasn't just a bystander pulled into his world. She was stepping into it willingly, not just for Damien, but for Luca. And somewhere deep inside, for herself too. Because she knew now that whatever happened, she couldn't walk away from this man. Not anymore. The city pulsed with danger as Damien's convoy cut through the streets. Elena sat rigid in the back seat, every nerve on fire. She had never felt more alive, or more afraid. Damien's men communicated through radios, short-clipped words that carried the weight of war. The sound of it made Elena's chest tighten. This wasn't just about reclaiming Luca. It was about power, survival. Beside her, Damien sat in silence. His face was carved from stone, but his hands clenched and unclenched against his knees, the only giveaway that beneath his steel mask, a father's terror churned. "Where would he take Luca?" Elena asked softly. Damien's eyes flicked to hers, sharp and searching. "Somewhere close enough to keep leverage, but hidden enough to stall me. Marco knows the city. Too well." Her heart squeezed. "Then how do we find him?" Damien leaned forward, speaking to the driver. "We don't. We make him come to us." The plan unfolded like a deadly game of chess. An abandoned warehouse by the docks. Damien's men spread out, securing the perimeter. Inside, the air smelled of rust and salt water, shadows stretching across broken crates. "This is where we draw him," Damien said. "We let word slip that I'm ready to negotiate. He won't be able to resist." Elena's stomach twisted. "And what if he doesn't come?" Damien's eyes burned. "He will. Because men like Marco can't resist showing off when they think they've already won." The hours crawled. Elena paced the edge of the warehouse, her heart pounding. She caught Damien watching her once, his gaze softening for just a flicker, before hardening again. "You don't have to be here," he said. "Yes, I do," she whispered back, and that was the end of it. Near midnight, the sound of engines cut through the silence. Black SUVs rolled up outside, headlights slicing through the fog. Elena's breath caught. Marco stepped out first, a cruel smile cutting across his face. And beside him, Luca. The boy's wrists bound, fear wide in his eyes as he was tugged forward by one of Marco's men. Elena nearly lunged, but Damien's hand shot out, gripping her arm like iron. His eyes locked on Marco, his whole body vibrating with lethal restraint. "Damien," Marco called, spreading his arms mockingly. "Didn't think you'd have the guts to face me in person." "Let him go," Damien growled. His voice was low, steady, deadly. Marco laughed. "You're in no position to make demands. You've gone soft, boss, and soft men lose everything." He shoved Luca forward, making the boy stumble. Elena gasped, tears stinging her eyes. Damien's jaw clenched, his control a razor-thin thread. "Take me," he said suddenly. Elena's head snapped toward him. "What?" "Let the boy go, and you can have me," Damien said, his eyes never leaving Marco's. "You want the Empire? Fine, but Luca walks free." Elena's heart cracked. "Damien, no!" Marco smirked. "The great Damien Romano surrendering? Oh, this is rich." He tilted his head, pretending to consider. "But why stop there? Maybe I take the boy and the woman too. She's been quite the distraction for you, hasn't she?" Elena froze as Marco's eyes raked over her. The way he said it made bile rise in her throat. Damien's control snapped. His gun was in his hand in a blink, aimed squarely at Marco's chest. Touch her, and you're dead before you breathe again. The warehouse exploded into chaos, men shouting, guns raised, tension like a live wire, and then, in the middle of it, Elena made her choice. While everyone's eyes were locked on Damien and Marco, she slipped to the side, her gaze fixed on Luca. The boy's small hands were bound, his eyes wet with fear. "Luca," she whispered fiercely. His eyes widened. "Run to me, baby. Now." He hesitated, but then she lunged, yanking him free from the distracted guard. The boy stumbled into her arms, clutching her tight. Gunfire erupted. Damien's men moved like shadows, returning fire. Marco shouted orders, but for the first time, uncertainty flashed across his face. Damien surged forward, his fury unleashed, every shot precise, every movement driven by a father's rage. "Go," he barked to Elena, covering them as bullets ricocheted through the warehouse. Clutching Luca, Elena ran, her legs burning, her heart slamming against her ribs. She didn't look back, not until she heard Marco's furious roar. "Damien! This isn't over!" Outside, the night air felt like fire in her lungs. She ducked behind a truck, holding Luca close as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Papa's coming," she whispered, though her own voice shook. "He's coming for us." And in that moment, she knew she would never walk away. Not from Luca, not from Damien, not from this life that terrified and consumed her, because she was already in too deep. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't want a way out. The gunfire faded into echoes, swallowed by the night. Smoke clung to the air inside the warehouse, mingling with the metallic tang of blood. Elena crouched behind the truck outside, Luca clutched tight against her chest. She could still feel his little heart hammering wildly, matching her own. Every second stretched long, unbearable, and then footsteps. Heavy, steady. Her head jerked up, fear slicing through her. But it wasn't Marco. It was Damien. His shirt was torn at the sleeve, a streak of blood along his jaw, his dark eyes burning with a feral fire. But he was alive, and in that moment nothing else mattered. "Papa!" Luca's cry split the night. Damien dropped to his knees before them, pulling his son into his arms with a sound that was half growl, half sob. The boy buried his face against Damien's chest, clutching his father's jacket with desperate little fists. "I've got you," Damien whispered hoarsely, his voice raw with emotion. "You're safe now, Luca. I swear to you, you're safe." Elena's throat closed, tears spilling freely. She had never seen him like this. Damien Romano, the feared mafia boss, crumbling into a man, a father, who had almost lost the most precious thing in his life. But the relief was short-lived. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Damien's men gathered around, urgent and grim. "Boss, we have to move," one said sharply. "Marco's still out there. Cops are closing in." Damien lifted his gaze, his face hardening again. He pressed a kiss to Luca's hair, then handed him gently to Elena. "Stay with him," he ordered. "What about you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I have to finish this," Damien said. "If Marco lives, he'll never stop coming for Luca, or for you." Her breath caught. "Then don't go alone." For the first time, his eyes softened. "You've already done more than anyone I've ever trusted." "But this is my war, Elena." She shook her head fiercely, gripping his arm. "No, it's our war now." Back at Damien's mansion, the night turned into a blur of chaos. Security doubled, gates locked down. Luca was checked by a doctor, who assured Elena the boy was unharmed, though shaken. When he finally fell asleep in the big guest bed, Elena tucked him in, brushing hair from his forehead tenderly. Her heart ached at how fragile he looked, so small against the vast pillows. When she turned, Damien was in the doorway, watching silently. "You're good with him," he murmured. She managed a shaky smile. "He's a brave kid." Damien stepped closer, shadows clinging to him, the weight of the night etched deep in the lines of his face. "I owe you," he said quietly. "Not just for tonight, for everything. You saved my son. You stood by me when you had every reason to run." Elena's breath caught under the intensity of his gaze. "I didn't do it for debt, Damien. I did it because I care. About him, about you." The silence between them stretched, charged with something neither could deny anymore. Slowly, Damien reached for her hand. His palm was rough, his grip firm, but trembling ever so slightly. "I've built my life on fear and violence," he whispered. "I never thought love had a place in it. But with you," his voice cracked, "with you, everything is different." Elena's heart slammed against her ribs. She wanted to say the words. She wanted to tell him she felt the same. But before she could, the mansion lights flickered. Then, a loud crack echoed outside. Gunshots. Chaos erupted. Damien snapped into command instantly, barking orders into his radio. Men scrambled through the halls, weapons raised. "Marco's here," Damien growled, his eyes dark as night. "The bastard followed us home." Elena's blood ran cold. She grabbed Luca, holding him close as Damien loaded a fresh clip into his gun. "Stay in this room. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." "Damien, please." He cupped her face suddenly, his hands rough but tender, his eyes blazing. "I'll die before I let him touch either of you." And then he was gone, swallowed by the storm of violence tearing through the mansion. Elena clutched Luca to her chest, rocking him as the sounds of battle thundered through the halls. The boy buried his face against her shoulder, whimpering. She whispered fiercely into his hair, as much a prayer for herself as for him. "He'll come back, Luca. Your papa will come back. He has to." But deep inside, fear gnawed at her, because she had seen the rage in Damien's eyes, the kind of rage that left no room for mercy. And she knew tonight would change everything. Forever. The Romano mansion shook with violence. Bullets cracked against marble pillars, glass shattered, men shouted as war spilled through the grand halls. Elena clutched Luca in the locked room upstairs, every sound a dagger in her chest. She could hear Damien's men returning fire, their boots pounding the floor. Somewhere in that chaos was Damien, her anchor, her heart, her greatest fear. "Papa," Luca whispered, his voice trembling. Elena kissed the top of his head, forcing strength into her words. "He's fighting for us, sweetheart. He's stronger than all of them." But inside, terror gnawed at her, because Marco hadn't come to negotiate. He had come to end this once and for all. Downstairs, Damien moved like a storm unleashed. Every shot he fired was precise, every strike brutal. His men followed his lead, cutting down Marco's soldiers one by one. But for every body that fell, more kept pouring in. And then, through the haze of smoke and gunfire, Marco appeared, dressed in black, his smirk cold and triumphant. He strode through the chaos as though he owned it, his eyes locked on Damien with burning hatred. "Romano!" Marco's voice boomed across the hall. "Still hiding behind your men? Or are you finally ready to face me like a man?" Damien's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, gun raised, voice like thunder. "It ends tonight." Marco's grin widened. "On that we agree." The two men collided in a violent storm. Gunfire gave way to fists as Damien charged, slamming Marco against a marble column. The crack of bone against stone echoed. Marco snarled, driving a knee into Damien's ribs, the air rushing from his lungs. They grappled like beasts, every punch fueled by years of rivalry, betrayal, and blood. Marco drew a knife, the blade flashing under the chandelier's fractured light. He slashed, grazing Damien's arm. Damien roared, twisting the knife from Marco's grip and hurling it across the room. "You're not taking my son." Marco laughed darkly, blood trickling from his lip. "Your son? He's already mine. Elena too. You think you can protect them? You'll only watch them burn." The words sliced deeper than any blade. Damien's fury ignited, blinding, unstoppable. He drove Marco back, fists pounding, until the man staggered against the railing of the grand staircase. But Marco wasn't finished. With a savage snarl, he pulled a hidden pistol from his jacket, aiming squarely at Damien's chest. Upstairs, Elena's heart jolted. The locked door rattled violently. Someone was trying to force it open. Her blood turned to ice. She shoved Luca behind her, gripping a heavy lamp in her hands. The door burst inward. One of Marco's men stormed inside, gun raised. Elena swung with every ounce of strength she had. The lamp crashed against his head, sending him sprawling. She grabbed Luca's hand, dragging him toward the hallway. They had to find Damien. Now. Back in the grand hall, time slowed to a razor's edge. Marco's finger tightened on the trigger. Damien stood in the open, no cover, no time to move, and then Elena's voice cut through the chaos. "Damien!" He turned. She was on the staircase, clutching Luca's hand, terror and defiance blazing in her eyes. Marco's gaze snapped toward them. His lips curled into a vicious smile. "Perfect," he hissed. "Two birds, one bullet." He swung the gun toward Elena and Luca. Damien's world narrowed to a single point of focus. His heart stopped. He didn't think. He moved. With a guttural roar, he lunged, slamming into Marco just as the gun went off. The shot exploded, the sound deafening, shattering glass above them. For a split second, silence. Then Damien drove Marco hard into the floor, wresting the gun from his grip. He pressed the barrel against Marco's chest, his teeth bared, his whole body trembling with rage. "You'll never touch them again," Damien growled. Marco's smile faltered, replaced by shock. The gunshot thundered through the mansion. Marco went still. The battle stilled. Marco's men, seeing their leader fall, broke and scattered. Damien's men surged, driving them out until the mansion stood quiet, except for the ringing echoes of violence. Damien staggered to his feet, chest heaving, blood staining his sleeve. His eyes lifted, and there she was. Elena. Standing frozen at the top of the stairs, Luca clinging to her side. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Damien's gun clattered to the marble floor, his body swaying. Elena rushed down, catching him just as his knees buckled. "Damien!" Her hands pressed against his wound, tears blurring her vision. "Stay with me. Please stay with me." His hand found her cheek, his thumb brushing away her tears with a tenderness that broke her soul. "You saved him," Damien whispered, his voice ragged. "You saved us both." Elena shook her head, choking on sobs. "No, you did. You fought for us." His gaze softened, weary but unyielding. "I'd fight 1,000 wars if it meant keeping you." And in that moment, Elena knew the truth. This wasn't just about surviving the Mafia's world anymore. It wasn't just about a ruthless man protecting his son. It was about love. Raw, fierce, impossible love. And no matter what came next, she was his, forever. The mansion smelled of smoke and blood, but the gunfire had ended. Silence, heavy and fragile, settled over the ruins of war. Elena knelt on the marble floor, cradling Damien against her lap. His wound bled through the torn fabric of his shirt, but his breathing, thank God, remained steady. "Stay awake," she whispered, brushing damp hair from his forehead. "Just stay with me a little longer." He smirked faintly, though pain shadowed his face. "Boss's orders?" She laughed through her tears, gripping his hand tight. "No, woman's orders." His chuckle turned into a groan, but the sound filled her with hope. He was alive. Hours later, under the careful hands of the family doctor, Damien's wounds were stitched. He refused a hospital, too dangerous, too many questions, but Elena never left his side. Luca curled on the edge of the bed, exhaustion pulling him into sleep with his tiny hand gripping his father's. Damien kept his other hand in Elena's, his eyes fluttering open and shut. "You should rest too," he murmured. "I will," she whispered, brushing her thumb over his knuckles. "When you're safe." For once, the great Damien Romano didn't argue. Days passed. The mansion began to breathe again, broken windows replaced, walls scrubbed clean. But scars lingered in its halls, just as they lingered in the hearts of those who survived. Marco was gone. His empire crumbled without him, his men scattering like shadows at dawn. The war was over. And yet, Elena knew the fight inside Damien wasn't finished. She found him one evening in the garden, Luca chasing fireflies nearby. Damien stood alone, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his gaze distant. "You're thinking too much," Elena said gently, stepping beside him. He glanced at her, his expression softening. "Old habits." Her eyes searched his face. "You won, Damien. It's over." His jaw tightened. "I killed a man in front of my son. That doesn't feel like winning." She touched his arm, grounding him. "You saved him. You saved me. That boy still looks at you like you hung the stars." Don't ever doubt that. His gaze shifted to Luca, who laughed as fireflies danced around him. Slowly, Damien's chest eased. He turned back to Elena, his eyes full of something he had once sworn he didn't deserve: peace. Later that night, when Luca finally drifted to sleep, Damien and Elena stood on the balcony, the city lights flickering in the distance. I used to believe love was weakness, Damien confessed, his voice low, that it made a man vulnerable, easy to destroy. And now? She asked softly. He looked at her, his gaze fierce but tender. Now I know it's the only thing that makes a man strong enough to fight. Her breath caught, her heart pounding as he stepped closer. His hand slid to her cheek, his touch reverent. Elena, he whispered, his voice breaking. I don't want to live another day without you. Not as the boss, not as the fighter, just as a man who finally found the woman who makes him whole. Tears filled her eyes. Damien, and then his lips met hers. It wasn't the brutal passion of desperation or fear. It was slow, steady, claiming, a kiss that promised more than words ever could. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. Stay, not just for Luca, for me, for us. Elena smiled through her tears. I wasn't going anywhere. Months later, the Romano estate had transformed. The air of war was gone, replaced with something warmer, safer. Laughter echoed through the halls now, Luca's laughter. One morning, as the boy tugged Elena into the kitchen to show her a drawing, Damien watched from the doorway. His chest swelled at the sight, his son smiling, Elena's soft voice encouraging him, the home no longer haunted by violence. Papa, Luca called. Look, it's us. The crayon sketch was messy but clear, 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a bright sun. Damien's throat tightened. He lifted Luca into his arms, pressing a kiss to his son's hair. Yes, he said thickly. That's us. That night, Damien stood once more on the balcony, Elena leaning against his chest as the city stretched before them. I've spent my life ruling with fear, he said. But now, I want to rule with something stronger. For Luca, for you. Elena tilted her head up at him. And what's stronger than fear? His lips brushed her hair. Love. And for the first time, Damien Romano, mafia boss, feared king of the underworld, felt truly free. Because he wasn't just a boss anymore. He was a father, a man in love, a man with something worth protecting, worth living for. And as dawn broke over the city, painting the sky in gold, Damien pulled Elena close, his heart steady, his future clear. Together, they had survived the fire. And together, they would build a new life from its ashes, forever. Love never ends. It only finds new beginnings. If this story warmed your heart, subscribe now, and join us for the next journey where passion, fate, and devotion collide once more.